And I'm hoping to talk to you today not only about how the museum field is strategizing and working with social media, but also if you're involved with nonprofits or even a lot of for-profit companies, you may be able to use some of these ideas that the museum field is using to benefit your own personal endeavors. So that said, I have a lot to cover. I'm not going to cover the things that I think a lot of people in this room would better speak about, cultivating relationships with museum goers or volunteers, or branding your museum or a nonprofit organization's online presence. So instead I'm going to share a lot of examples of what the museum community has been doing. I'm just going to kind of spit them out, and hopefully some of them will stick and be interesting for you to follow up with. First, a little bit, just a tad about me. I have a handful of jobs, including my consulting company, Exhibit Smith. I'm at Exhibit Smith. I'm exhibitsmith.com. So feel free to find me there. But I actually fell into this Twitter machine by accident. I was starting my consulting company in 2009, and I set up my webpage and wanted a way to add some simple little updates to my website so people could see that I was working, they could see I had clients, but every time I went on a job I didn't want to update my website and make it a big deal. And my original goal for starting Twitter was just to have that little bit on my website, not to drive people to my Twitter site. I didn't know what an RT was, I didn't know what any of this was, but I just wanted it as a little side update. And from there, I just fell in head first and was really amazed by what my colleagues were doing online, what the museum institution, the museum field was doing as a whole. So perhaps the most common sense reason for being on social media is that it is a wonderful, free public relations and advertising venue. And of course with museums, that's ideal. So many museums are so small, they don't have any paid staff, they're all volunteer run, and now that the social media world has come around, they have an international forum from which a volunteer at such and such small town museum is able to get online, talk to people around the world, and to some extent compete with museums and other educational venues of every kind of size known to man. My colleagues and friends follow everything from these small historic sites to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Brooklyn Museum, kind of on equal planes, because they're all going to show up in your newsfeed equally. Have any of you, I'm originally from the Chicago area and spent a little over 5 years working at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. And I was curious to see if any of you had heard about their recent, last fall, a social media campaign called the Month at the Museum. Had any of you heard of this? I see some heads nodding, yes. This was a brilliant idea that I can't take any credit for. I worked there, I moved here, I was never involved with their marketing department, but it was fun to watch last fall because I knew so many people involved. Essentially, they had a nationwide contest to invite someone to move into their museum for an entire month, blog about it, tweet about it, update their status about it, post YouTube videos that all advertised the museum, of course, because she was living there and showing off all these wonderful attractions for an entire month. She became somewhat of a celebrity. People would come to the museum, paying admission, buying lunch, buying gifts, you know, what museums need to get that income in, because they wanted to see her. And she was also helping promote the museum's mission by promoting science education through her programming and her social media endeavors. This sort of innovative approach really paid off. I can't speak to figures or facts, but it was a hugely creative and hugely successful move on the museum's part to get people engaged with their visitors, both at home and on site at the museum. And as a nonprofit, as a museum, you always have to be in touch with what your mission is. And the social media field, I suppose you could say, is a wonderful way to promote your mission, keep people interested in what you're doing from home. This can be anything from posting, if you're a science museum, you could post, oh, NASA has its space shuttle launch. You get people engaged in these scientific topics while they're at home. Art museums, it's Picasso's birthday. You could tweet, you could post, you could show off items from your collection online. Perhaps items that haven't been on exhibit for a while. Because every museum gets complaints about, not everything's on exhibit. Well, now, with a simple photograph and a tweet, you can get items that maybe aren't on exhibit or can't be on exhibit because they're too fragile or for whatever reason, out to the masses to enjoy. For example, this morning, apparently Apprentice UK is about to start, and in the UK, their version of Donald Trump is Lord Alan Sugar. Great name, right? And this morning, I was lying in bed, because that's where I do my early morning tweeting. Truth is out. If you get a tweet from me around 7, that's where I am. The National Portrait Gallery in London, big museum, right? Well, they have a portrait of Lord Alan Sugar in their collection. And someone over there had the bright idea, oh wait, the show's about to start. Let's tweet about this. It got me to click the link, and it went straight to their online catalog, and I got to see a portrait of him. So kind of partnering with, piggybacking on the publicity of this upcoming event. Over Mother's Day, it's a great way for museums to use their assets. Art museums are posting mother-themed artwork, whether it was vases of flowers or pictures of mothers and children. For example, the Counter Prairie Living History site, which is very similar to our Living History Farms, was posting about Mother's Day, come see our mothers, our cows, our calves, our horses, our babies. Great ways to just get that extra shout out and give people more excuses, more reasons to come visit the site in person. Of course, history museums the Chicago History Museum will probably tweet about today is Chicago's birthday and give some information, perhaps link it back to their websites. All these things that are keeping people actively involved with the organization without having to leave their house, without having to pay the big bucks to come on site, and keeping the museum in the back of their mind for their future visits, for their future opportunities if they wish to donate or volunteer. You don't want to be forgotten. That leads me to the extension of the visit. As I said, you don't want to be forgotten. So if you get visitors to come to the museum, you don't want them to forget about you when they go home. And this is becoming more and more evident in the larger museums. They're starting to think about smart visits, where perhaps you're in an exhibit and you get a card and you're able to you do a quiz or do an interactive element on exhibit. You're then able to take your answers home or email them or send them to your Twitter page. Or perhaps museums also will post do-it-yourself projects, science experiments for science museums, for example, or do-it-yourself art projects to get the family involved, to keep them remembering the museum. I'm going to go over real quick a few outreach ideas that I had no idea until I fell onto the Twitter wagon, that are really taking the museum field by storm, and you should check them out. There's Ask a Curator, the hashtag Ask a Curator, that was held on September 1st last year. It was the inaugural Ask a Curator event where curators from around the world were hooked onto the museum's Twitter feed and were able to answer any questions from what the heck is a curator to when is my favorite painting or artifact going to be on display. There's also Follow a Museum, which debuted on February 1st, which just encouraged people to find a new museum and follow them on Twitter. And that had overwhelming response as well. So I guess I'll conclude by saying 10 minutes is not enough. But there are many ways that a museum or any nonprofit can look within their assets, whether it's artifacts or programming, and tweet or update statuses to keep their audience involved, keep them remembering the museum in the back of their head, and hopefully come back for another visit. So thank you very much.